Today was an event that culminated a year-long pilot project to implement complete streets in Baton Rouge.
It is a community issue because if you make streets safe for the older members of the family, then you've made them safe for everybody.
Welcome, my name is Justin Kozak. I am a researcher and policy analyst here at the Center for Planning Excellence. I have the pleasure of moderating this panel. First, I'd like to recognize our sponsor, Baker, Donaldson, Bierman, Caldwell, and Berkowitz. I'm pretty excited to moderate this panel, not just because I love a good map. You know, growing up, my favorite book was the Atlas. I still carry one around in my car. I have to explain it to young folk. But because planning, especially visionary planning, requires looking at the world a little differently. And a good map lets you do that. And when you start adding layers of data to a good map, it becomes powerful. It can take a good map from telling you what and where, and it can start telling you how and why. Geographers call this spatial analysis. One of the earliest and most famous examples of this, and some of you may be familiar with it, is a map made by Dr. John Snow. Not John Snow from earlier. This guy's a little older. In 1854, London was hit with a series of cholera outbreaks. And at this time, they didn't know how cholera spread or most diseases spread. They thought it was in the air, but Dr. John Snow had the radical idea that it was water-based. So what he did was he mapped out all the public wells in the Soho neighborhood of London. He went door to door counting the people who died, and with that data, he made this map. And what he noticed was that there was a clustering of deaths in this central area around a center well. So he went and he removed the handle to the pump at the Broad Street well, and he effectively ended the cholera outbreak in the Soho neighborhood. But then he looked closer at his map. And he looked at all this spatial data, and every black mark here is a person who died. But he noticed in this 2-block area, no one died. None of the workers got sick, and no one died. It's because it was a brewery. And everybody who worked there was able to drink as much beer as they wanted, the perk of the job. And so he was able to infer two things from having a good map and good data. One, most importantly, beer is good for you. And two, some aspect of the brewing process, the fermentation, killed the cholera. This then led to the insight that you can cure or improve water quality through some sort of treatment. So my point in bringing this up is that a good map and good data can not only teach you something, but it can give you answers to questions you haven't even gotten around to asking yet. And that can lead to some really visionary planning. With that, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. His name is Jerry Paffendorf. He's the CEO and co-founder of LOVELAND Technologies. It's a mapping company based in Detroit that focuses on mapping ownership and land use for properties across the world. The company works with governments, developers, neighborhood groups, and passionate individuals to gather and present information about property in clear, actionable ways. LOVELAND's Detroit projects include mapping tax foreclosures and digitizing the city's property information to help them fight blight. Paffendorf earned a master's degree from the University of Houston, Clear Lake. Please welcome me in joining Jerry.
Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon, everybody. So this has just been the coolest conference for me. I've been put to work here in the most wonderful way. Typically at conferences, you show up and you hope to meet the right people, also getting coffee at the same time. But I want to say thank you to all the organizers here who both asked me who I wanted to meet and then also plied me with lots of people in town who wanted to meet me. It's been incredible, and thank you for it. And what you're going to get here is sort of a short version of some of the things I've shared in back-to-back meetings over the last couple of days with people from Baton Rouge, people from the state, people from CPEX, people from New Orleans, people from all around, sharing a story of how we began mapping property problems and blight in Detroit and then built a system that can be applied to other cities around the country. So LOVELAND has gone crazy and assembled what's the largest publicly available data set of public property information at the parcel level. If you go to makeloveland.com, which is our free public website, you'll see that our team has scoured county data sets from around the country and brought together property shapes and ownership and so oftentimes a lot more information. If you head to the website, you can pull up the city that you're from. Chances are we have at least a base level of ownership information and sometimes sale prices, taxes, and things of that nature. And how we got started doing this work is, I don't know if you guys have heard this, but in Detroit we also have a lot of property problems. The short story is we were a city of 2 million people in the 50s. Now we're around 700,000 people. The city has a lot of vacant homes, a lot of vacant properties, and a lot of thirst to know who owns things, who's responsible for things, which properties are at risk of having something bad happen to them, like a foreclosure. So going back 5 or 6 years, we put up a website that tried to make it easy to get at that parcel level information. So if you go to the LOVELAND site, you can find a map like this for your community. We're starting with the neighborhood shapes and property ownership. You can get down to individual neighborhoods, turn on and off who owns things. So this is a neighborhood in Detroit and what the inventory that the land bank owns there. Pop down to an individual parcel, get a picture of the property that we license from Microsoft Bing's bird's eye view, and then whatever kind of assessment information that we have locally. So in 2013, 2014, the city of Detroit went bankrupt. It's the largest municipal bankruptcy in the US. It was a terrible thing, but also an opportunity for the city to try to right a lot of things that it had not been able to do because it had been very short on funds and hadn't had a rejuvenation of city services, we'll say, in some time. And because we had a popular local website where people looked up property information, we got asked by the White House, by local business leaders like Dan Gilbert at Quicken Loans, by the local foundation community, what could Loveland do to help the city get on top of its blight problem? And so we said, we all know that there's a ton of vacancy, a ton of dumping, a ton of things that need to be fixed and healed and rebuilt out there, but nobody has really gone door to door, property to property to look before. So what if we built a mobile app that city residents could use? They could go out, visit every parcel, take a picture, tap through a menu of options, and when they were done, we'd have a sort of a genetic code of the city's property conditions and land use. And wildly, we got approval to do that. We were able to hire 200 Detroit residents who went out to visit about almost 400,000 properties. And you can see the results of that on motorcitymapping.org. Now, the results were updated live through about the end of last year when the land bank that manages the demolition program took our tools and used them along with their own database internally. But you're able to see an amazing archive that how many vacant properties there are in the city. So on the right-hand side, you'll see about 50,000 unoccupied homes found by surveyors, just an incredible number, really between 50 and 60,000 vacant properties in the city. And when you go down to the neighborhood level in this case, not only do you see the public record governmental information like on the Loveland site, but you also see the information collected by the surveyors. So you can do things like turn on and off different color codings or visualizations, property occupancy, property condition, properties that have experienced fire damage, properties that need a boarding. And so you can imagine for the land bank and the building authority and other local governmental groups that are responsible for blight elimination and property rehab, this is like gold right here, because even though this is just the beginning of implementing the processes to do something about it, this is a necessary, if not completely sufficient step along the way. Quantifying what you have and having it in a format where things can be updated. And so every one of these parcels here, you can see this property was last updated in February of this year. You can go back in time, to the original photo of this house. And the part of the marriage of that, the door-to-door, where you have humans who know the neighborhoods, know the city, going out to observe things and collect fresh information, being able to tie that back to the governmental public record legal information is just invaluable. So on the site, you're able to do things like show me every unoccupied home that's in poor or suggest demolition condition, and that's in public ownership, but that's also in a historic district that still has its water on, and that down the line, depending on what you're looking for, which greatly aids decision-making along a number of different dimensions. Building on the ability to go door-to-door to look at property information to sort of like gauge how well is a property doing, we identified, to Justin's point about the cholera maps, one of the biggest gateways that we had to blight in Detroit is our tax foreclosure system. This is a really sad map because every property that is colored in at all on this map is a property that is currently property tax delinquent in Detroit. So it's between 1 and 3 years behind on its property taxes. And we have a system where after 3 years of non-payment, the county treasurer forecloses and then puts the property up at auction where anybody can purchase it. And that was a gateway for displacement. People would buy the properties. They would evict people often if they couldn't turn them into renters. And houses were going empty through this process and then needing to enter into that demolition pipeline. So we were actually able to go door to door, last year backed by the treasurer, and this year there's a group with Quicken Loans and a local housing organization going out to do this. where people are knocking on every door that's at risk of foreclosure, handing out helpful tax foreclosure prevention information, and also administering an interview, an optional interview, to find out if people are renters, owners, if they want to continue owning the home, if they're eligible for payment plans. And so this is going from just assessing the property to now having a conversation to figure out what's going on with the family situation or the human situation inside of the home. Because we've been able to gather a nationwide parcel data set, we've been able to work with, at this point, dozens of cities around the country to do some pretty interesting things, similar, in some cases somewhat different to what we've done in Detroit. And so if anybody has the notepads out, I have very little time, but these might be some interesting sites to check out. We just finished a citywide property survey in Macon, Georgia, with Macon-Bibb County. Again, going to every parcel of land, assessing, is it occupied, is it vacant, what are the conditions of the property, and the local Blight Task Force is currently using that data to strategize and raise funds. We just helped complete a citywide property survey in Flint, Michigan, and this is a really amazing website. This was an in-depth website that we built with them that just came online maybe a month ago. FlintPropertyPortal.com integrates live a number of different data sets from the Genesee County Land Bank and the city of Flint. So when residents go to the site, they can pull up things: where are properties in the demolition status, what's publicly owned, what's the future land use for my area, is somebody in the community supposed to be taking care of this property or not, and they can also just download the app from the App Store and update information on this site whenever they want. And then last example that I'll share that you may find interesting, we recently received a grant from the JP Morgan Chase Foundation to work to provide our mapping tools across Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus, Ohio. So there's a website, 3csmapping.com, where communities in those cities are doing similar kinds of citywide property surveys and also integrating public data sets. So while I've been here the last couple of days, as I mentioned, I've had just wonderful meetings with people from local and state government, and it makes me so happy to see. I don't know how we're going to be able to work together yet, or who all wants to do things together, but the same system that we built to facilitate the projects in Detroit, to facilitate projects in Flint and in Cleveland and in Macon and other cities, is so easy to just start up a new map and start importing data into it and start inviting surveyors into the program to hit the streets. That I sat down with folks and started. This is the sort of the behind the scenes, like private version of the site that people can use, where you can create your own survey questions. So it might not be the same questions that exist in Detroit or exist in other cities, but you come up with the questions you want people to answer. As soon as you save that, it becomes something that's accessible on the app for the people that you invite into it. I wasn't able to do a lot of great property surveying in the city. You can see most of the photos for properties I surveyed are actually from inside the room upstairs, taking a picture of the same whiteboard over and over again, demonstrating how this works. And I was also able, because, and Warren will talk with this, I'm sure, there's already a great start, a lot of data available locally in Baton Rouge through the data portal. Increasing number of cities have these data portals where there are public data sets that are there available to download. We've built sort of a viewer for that, where all you need is a spreadsheet with addresses, and you drop the spreadsheet onto this page, and it automatically populates on the site. So this was a spreadsheet of about 70,000 311 reports in Baton Rouge that I got from the data portal. And I just popped it onto the map, and everything colored in blue is a report, and everything red is a report that had a dimension of blight. It was a blight report of some kind. And so here immediately, we're just helping build on a foundation of great data and processes to hopefully make things a little bit easier to get insight into blight and to provide tools to get out into the street and get more community engagement about understanding the scope of the problem. Coming soon, I had some really interesting conversations with some planners at the state level about what would it look like to not just do a survey or data visualization in one city at a time, but what would it look like to do something across the entire state of Louisiana. And one thing the team has been hard at work on is making it so you can basically press a button and say, show me statewide ownership, show me statewide land use, show me statewide X, Y, or Z. When I leave here tomorrow, I head back to Detroit, and I get on a plane for Puerto Rico, where we've been invited to come see if we can be useful on an island-wide property needs assessment, we'll call it. So people are interested in taking the kind of work from Detroit, from Flint, from Macon, from Cleveland, and seeing if it's something that can be replicated, where there's a lot of needs that are not only the physical property damage, like I mentioned, but also assessment needs of, like, what do people need right now? Is it food? Is it medicine? Is it some sort of support? Is it help filling out insurance forms or claims? What is it? And so we'll see what develops from that. But I wanted to end on that note because it's part of the arc that I think is interesting of coming from trying to solve a local need that's allowed us to do something national, and that's kind of bringing us into bigger and bigger projects. And if anybody wants to contact me, that's my email address. I'll be hanging out at the conference afterwards, and I look forward to more discussion on the panel. And with that, I think Justin's going to come back to introduce Nick.
Thank you, Jerry. Our next speaker is Nick Popovich. He's an account executive at Esri. Esri is an international supplier of geographic information system software, web GIS, and geodatabase management applications. Esri is the creator of ArcGIS, which is extensively used in community planning and by municipalities. Nick will discuss how location-based technology can be used throughout the emergency management lifecycle to help organizations make smarter, data-driven decisions. He's worked with local governments for over 20 years and is a graduate from Stephen F. Austin State University. Nick?
Good afternoon. When I grew up in a small town in East Texas, and when I was 16, I had the privilege to start working. My first job ever was working at the local municipality, working for the city there. And it really opened my eyes to how important local government was to the lives of the citizens that they provided services for. You know, everything from the water system to the emergency services to the drainage system, the local government provided all these services, and they were really critical for the society to flourish and for people to have a good way of life. And it really led for me to be able to understand how those services and those systems were built and how the local governments provided that information. I had a great mentor at the city, and he really helped me with my passion as a geek to be able to apply information and do interesting things at the city, and I think that's led to me where I am today. So what I do now at Esri is I actually work and I partner with local governments around the Texas and Louisiana area to use GIS software to be able to help people make decisions. And at the city level and the local level, I think at most level, and a lot of people here, I think, use GIS in different ways. But location is key to understanding what's going on in an organization, in a community. You know, at the local level, communities and cities and organizations, a permit happens at a location. An accident might happen at an intersection. Someone's houses get flooded and those people are affected. So all this is location-based, and the way that GIS works is you can layer these data layers together, just like Jerry was talking about in his presentation. You can layer these information together to be able to find a more complete picture of what you're looking at and to make better decisions. So what I'm going to focus today on in our limited section was about how people used GIS technology during the recent Harvey storm over in the Houston area. What we've kind of seen is in the disaster management scenario is that location kind of follows these 6 patterns when it comes to emergency management. And these patterns are all about trying to figure out where things are happening, how they relate to each other, also to try to figure out what it all means and what action to take. And I think you'll see that throughout these a couple of slides where people were taking this information and being able to figure out quickly how it relates to what they're trying to do and the mission that they're trying to be involved in. You know, I think a lot of unserved areas around this area are how emergency management people and responders, first responders, can use location better to do their job. I think some areas are doing really good in it, but there's a lot of untapped areas where this could be very powerful for them. And a couple of areas here that we're going to talk about is situational awareness for one. This map up here is called a story map. It's an Esri story map. And this was a series of maps. A story map lets you create a series of maps and multimedia to tell your story. And they actually use this as their platform for daily briefings at the Texas Department of Emergency Management. This actually gave them ability to bring in live feeds of weather data, stream gauges, information about where their crews were, where the populations that were going to be mostly affected. As you know, if you kept up with that storm, they didn't actually know, you know, that storm was kind of crazy how it went. I actually live in the Houston area, and part of my neighborhood got flooded. Fortunately, my house didn't, but we didn't really know what was going on because the storm was just all over the place. But this gave people at the state level information to be able to make decisions on where to pre-planned for resources, where they need to put their people, where they think people were going to be affected. Down here on the other corner, we have what's called the operations dashboard. This actually allowed people to connect to live feeds of information that were coming in from shelters, so they could actually see what shelters were being impacted and where people were being sheltered. So they could respond to that and say, okay, we need more resources here, more people here. These are the shelters that are going to be greatly impacted because these are the amount of flooding we're having in these different areas. And this graphic actually shows the impact summary of the people that were impacted. This is actually after the storm, so this is the full 7 days. And some areas in Texas got over 51 inches of rain in 7 days. And you can see over there, that's actually 7 million people that had over 40 inches of rain in 7 days during that storm. Another area where we saw a lot of people taking advantage of GIS technology was in the damage assessment. I almost call this the actual data collection part, right? So people were out there collecting data in different ways. We have some mobile tools that people were using. The emergency management coordinator in Beaumont, city of Beaumont, told me that they were actually able to go out and do damage assessment on, I think it was 14,000 structures in a week. And he said if they would have done that through traditional methods, it would have took them at least 5 to 6 weeks to do that. So they were able to get that information very quickly and be able to say, okay, here's where we need to prioritize our resources and our response. They actually, in Beaumont, they actually used drones as well. So they actually took a drone and were able to take imagery of different events that were happening, plus they actually did a 3D model of their debris piles and be able to calculate the density of those debris piles, the volumetric calculations of it, to be able to estimate how much debris they were going to have. It was a pretty interesting project. This picture up here is actually from part of my neighborhood. A partner of ours actually went out in a boat and took street level imagery of the neighborhood, and then what they did is they're going to put this into an application we actually developed with the city of New Orleans called Photo Survey. It actually ties street level imagery back to the parcel. So then you can actually connect back to the parcel and see what imagery connects to the parcel to determine what kind of flooding affected those residences. Debris management, I'd never been in a storm like this before. I know a lot of people here in Baton Rouge had the storm that Warren's going to talk about. I've seen pictures of the streets with the mountains of debris on the sides and people's houses just in the middle of their yard, and it's very heartbreaking. But I never really experienced that before till this storm and, driving down those neighborhoods. Talking to people, that was a big thing, was how quickly can we get that debris out of the neighborhoods so that people can get back to some semblance of normalcy, because it's very important for people's psyche to get back to that. The city of Bel Air, I think one thing about the GIS tools is that it scales really well. So city of Houston, of course, Texas, state of Texas, all these huge places. City of Bel Air is a very small city, but they were able to quickly be able to map out where their damage was happening. They actually had over 40% of the houses in Bel Air were damaged by the storm. But they were able to map out really quickly where the damage was happening, how it related to where people were putting permits, and then they actually were able to map out where the debris was going to be managed at. So they actually mapped out where the debris was happening, where they were getting calls for that, and then they said, okay, our crews that are going out and clean that debris, we want to be able to communicate that back to the public really quickly on where our plan is to get this debris out of the neighborhoods as quickly as possible. So they actually did a great job of managing that debris cycle and getting their neighborhoods clean as that as possible. The other area we saw a lot of people doing was location analytics. Harris County, I think the estimate was 200,000 structures in Harris County received some kind of damage from the flooding. And Harris County has very limited resources. So what they were trying to figure out, where do they get the most bang for their buck as far as where do we need to send people to help communities that are vulnerable to this event. So what they did is they looked at demographics and overlaid their flooding models that they had got from the state and from the federal government, and be able to say, you know what, this neighborhood's the most vulnerable. We need to put extra effort in our resources to provide resources to this neighborhood. So that's how they did their outreach that way. So I thought that was a really good example. And then another interesting idea on how GIS can be worked is how you can communicate this information back to the public really rapidly. The state of Texas set up this public website that showed where all the evacuation centers were, so people could see like where the evacuation center was compared to where they were, so they could get there and be able to get assistance. The Harris County, they actually put out a website that showed where all these boil water notices were throughout the county, because it was quite a few. And then I don't have a screenshot of it, but in my neighborhood, we're really close to this, the Brazos River and this reservoir in that county. So the models kept changing rapidly because there was so much rain. So much rain kept coming. So the evacuation zones kept changing. So a neighborhood that was mandatory evacuation would change, or more neighborhoods would come online. And they were able to put a map out that put those evacuation zones in people's hands really quickly and show people whether they were in mandatory evacuation zones or not based on the models that were predicted. And in a week, they got 3 million views on that application to be able to show the people what they needed to do and respond to that emergency really quickly. So I know this slide is really busy and you can't read all this, and this is kind of on purpose, but what we're trying to do at Esri is develop a series of solutions to make organizations smarter. And what we try to do is use location in these solutions. And you can see they're all centered around this idea of the community. So public safety, we talk about that. We talk about some of those solutions. But there's all kinds of these solutions that we've developed that are built on the idea that location is important to the work that cities and governments and other organizations do to help them make smarter decisions. There's actually over 250 of these solutions that are freely available on our website, and they're open source. So you can actually take them, put your own data in them, or even modify them if you want. So if you want to go check this out, it's esri.com/smart solutions is how you get to this website, where you can look at these solutions, and then you can, like, whatever area that you're interested in, you can find a solution based on that, right? So I encourage you to do that. With any technology, whether it's GIS or any technology, I think it requires more than just the technology being there. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was telling me that the technology part's easy. It's the people part that's hard. And I really think that's the case. I really enjoyed this conference. There's a lot of leadership here and a lot of vision about how people can use technology to really make a difference in their communities. And I think that's really important to have any technology be successful. Another important thing about technology, implementing new technology in GIS, is about aligning it with the organization's mission. Without that alignment, you're just doing technology just for the sake of technology. You need to understand, okay, I'm going to implement this. It's going to help us respond to disasters better, or it's going to help us fight blight, for instance. You also need to plan out this kind of things, and you need governance around it so people understand what the role is in the technology deployment, the plan is, and what the steps you're going to do to make that happen. And then I think a really great thing is you need good people, because with my experience in local government, there's a lot of great people with a lot of talent. And I really challenge the visionaries and the leadership to reach into your groups, because there's a lot of people that know technology and they have tools available to them. And sometimes it's just a conversation you have to have and say, hey, I got this problem. How can you help me apply location to find a solution for that? And there's a lot of great people and a lot of great organizations around here that can help, I think, even more than they're already doing. So with that, if you need to contact me or check out esri.com/smart, and I'll let Justin take it over. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Our next presenter is Warren Kron from right here. It's Baton Rouge. Before I go into his introduction, I need to offer Warren a thank you. There have been multiple times where I've been sitting in my office and Boo will pop her head in and say, I need a subdivision map, or I need flood maps or flood areas, and I go to EBR GIS, and I think he's the person that I need to thank for that, so thank you. But Warren has worked for the City of Baton Rouge and Parish of East Baton Rouge over the last 19 years in the Department of Information Services and the Office of the Planning Commission. And his public service has been focused on the development of an enterprise GIS program. This effort has involved many multidisciplinary projects, developing a data model, building applications to extend GIS throughout city parish government, and playing a key role in the city parish's shift to open data. Warren earned a bachelor's degree of landscape architecture from the LSU Robert Reich School of Landscape Architecture. He serves as the Louisiana Municipal Association member and chair of the 2017 Louisiana GIS Council. Warren is a certified GIS professional, enjoys gardening, golfing, and traveling. Warren, thank you.
Thank you, Justin, for that nice introduction. I'm really excited about being here at the Smart Growth Conference. I'm going to talk to you this afternoon about the way we applied GIS technology during last year's flood event. 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, when I came on with the Information Services Department, we knew at that time we had to change the way that we were sharing our data, in particular our GIS data, over the internet with everyone. So in particular, what I'm going to talk to you about is this web GIS technology that we're now using. And how I used it during, or how my team used it during the flood last year. So not only did the flood itself change our lives here in Baton Rouge, it also had an effect on the way we were managing events in our Emergency Operations Center. This was really my first rodeo in the Emergency Operations Center, being in the mix of all that was happening there. Back in January of 2016, we really started testing the waters of some of this new technology that we were pushing out over the internet. And, you know, obviously, when August came around, we got to fully test it. I put this map up here to start with because in the height of the flood on Sunday, or very early Sunday morning, I had taken a nap for about 30 minutes and was woken up by a police officer who asked me to come put together some type of application where they could answer the phone of the people that were calling to be rescued from their houses from the rising water. And I guess through muscle memory or something, I put this map together in the middle of the morning. And before long, when all the phones were ringing at the same time in our EOC, I was noticing how things were happening there, and they were just using the old paper method to take the phone call, write it down, and then hand it to the fire department to do the dispatching to go rescue that person. I said, look, there's data going right in front of my eyes on these pieces of paper. So we disrupted that process, and the GIS team became the middleman and took those pieces of paper and began recording over 2,000 or so of these dots that you see on this map here. And we put these maps obviously up on the board, and before long, as these dots began to populate this map, we could really see the neighborhoods that were being flooded for the first time in their history. At the same time, we had all these guys, the Cajun Navy, showing up with their boats and not knowing where to go. So we were literally zooming into this map, taking pictures with our phone, and texting little vicinity maps to the guys in the boats to go rescue people. This map actually, let's see, led to the next thing that I've never done before either. I was being asked simultaneously while all this was going on by the Governor's Office of Homeland Security to create an inundation map to give to the governor. I've never done anything for the governor, so that in itself was mind-boggling. But I knew for sure that I wasn't going to kind of revert and go get out a Sharpie and printed map and start drawing lines on it, estimating where I thought it flooded. I've been in this too long. I know that I had available data that I could use to generate an inundation map. So my team got together, we brainstormed for a while and just thought about all the data points that we had at our disposal. And of course, we took those points from the search and rescue calls, 911 calls. 3 people were calling in 311, reporting their streets were flooding, had sewer backups, and so forth. So we took as many data points as possible and aggregated spatially with our 100-year flood hazard area and our census block data to come up with this first draft of this inundation map. And that was presented to the governor come noon on Sunday, and eventually was used for the federal declaration for us to get FEMA assistance. A couple days of reiterating this process, getting more data, and hearing from the guys that were coming in from out in the field doing the rescues and helping people. Mind you, I've never left at EOC. I didn't go outside for 4 straight days, so I don't really know what's going out there. But people are telling me, they're looking at these maps that we've created, and they're telling me, man, it looks really accurate. Somehow or another, I convinced my boss to release this inundation map publicly within 4 days of the flood. On that first Friday, we shared this information publicly with a press release. We encouraged people to look at it and submit their feedback to us to help us make it even better. As a matter of fact, we were recognized, our GIS team was recognized this spring by the state remote sensing GIS workshop for the work we did building this layer and that process. But I think the part they were most that they respected the most was just that we released it to the public so soon to ask for the feedback. Once we had an inundation layer, then it was very easy for those of us that use the GIS software to then do overlay analysis and so forth to come up with all the statistics that our council members are asking, our administration and so forth. So we use one of our GIS story maps to just take all these various maps and put them into one story map. Maybe some of you guys have seen this. I've been using this web GIS software now for a couple years, and we get 100 views or so a week, and I thought that was pretty good. I've never had a map that gets 70,000 views in its first week like it did for the inundation map. I can remember finally getting to go home one night, the first night, and Nick calling me saying that, hey, somebody in New Zealand's trying to look at your inundation map and it's down. I thought, I finally thought I was going to get a break, but I had to go back to work and fix that. But yeah, I mean, the two spikes you see there are actually when the Advocate ran articles online about the map and they embedded it into their online version of it. Once more data became available, we were able to do more modeling. So the red dots you see on this map are USGS high water survey marks. We then used that information, our digital elevation model, and our watershed boundaries to build a depth model. We did all this in-house. And the cool thing about this, there was a certain reason why we built this map to help the transportation and traffic engineers get reimbursed from FEMA for damage that was done to roads. But the cool thing about this, we went through an entirely different method to come up with this. But when you overlay it with the original inundation layer that we created, it validates it. We were smart enough to require that the debris contractor submit us a coordinate file every time they filled up their truck with debris. And every night, they sent us a file with all these coordinates of where they had picked up debris across the city. The first thing every morning for about a year when we came into the office was we took the data that they had sent us overnight and updated this debris collection map. This was really remarkable because the debris contractor who works all over the country after these hurricanes, tornadoes, and whatnot, cleaning up, they had never really used GIS for their monitoring. And so we not only changed the way they do business moving forward, but at the same time it was keeping our administration up to date on where debris pickup had occurred, and it was telling the citizens, hey, here's where you need to be, or here's the day you need to have your debris out on the curb to get it picked up. This went on and on and on, and here's the map showing, when it was last passed and the schedule for it. So those are things that we did during the event itself and recovery. And the last few things I want to talk about here are applications that we've created since then so that we're better prepared the next time around when this happens. So working with programmers and having vision from my boss and leaders, we pulled together a team to take two disparate systems where our emergency managers enter all their data about where shelters are going to be opened and where sandbag locations are, points of distribution. And when they enter that information in, they tie it to an address. Well, that's the key location component to a GIS map. So as they enter that information, we've made it to where it automatically pops a pin on the emergency info app, and then that information is broadcasted publicly. So that was a pretty cool integration project that we did now. And it's kind of set up, ready to go at any moment's notice. The second thing here is some of these colored dots are hard to see, but any red dot you see on this map is a 311 call for service. Could be anything, potholes, signs, whatnot. But we're pulling that data from the 311 system on a frequent basis now, and we're overlaying it in this map with all of our public works vehicles and getting near real-time locations of those vehicles. We can click on each one and find out, who's driving it and what kind of vehicle it is. This map provides situational awareness for all our public works supervisors to say, hey, look, we've got drainage issues going on in this neighborhood here. Let's take some of the trucks that can help fix these issues and bring them over here. So these maps will be up and running during an event. And lastly, this one I'm kind of excited about because I love watersheds so much, but we took the stream gauges from the USGS and NOAA, and we're polling their sites every hours when that stream gauge data comes in and refreshes, and we're programmatically comparing it, the current reading with the previous reading to get the difference. And whether the river is rising or falling or stayed the same is how we color code those dots you see there. Those are the actual gauge locations. And then we pull all the detailed information from those gauge websites into the little pop-ups. So all the user has to do is click on a gauge, and they get the hydrograph and any other relative information. It's all in one place. Previously, the people working in the EOC would have to go to all these web pages. They are even copying data down into Excel to print a report. It would take way too much time to do this. So the other benefit of this application was that we added a button basically for the emergency manager to just press and print their own report and just put it into their binder for situational awareness. So we've automated that process as well. So that's the last of my slides. I just want to leave you, I know there's no doubt we're going to have to face another natural disaster in our future. I just hope that we can utilize this GIS technology to help us make the right decisions, and be effective and efficient with our operations. There's no doubt that web GIS, I think it's proven now, we've reduced the clutter of all the paper maps in our EOC and the uncertainty of what map is the most current and all using this kind of technology. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Warren. We do have a microphone up front, and I will open it up to questions, but I have one for the panel just to start us off. We're talking about mapping tools here, and a tool is only useful if it's used, and that is built both on the end user and for local governments and making decisions. So, because I believe in home field advantage, I'll ask Warren first, but I'll apply this to the three of you. How do you overcome the challenge of citizen engagement, both in using these maps to inform them, but also to teach as well?
Is the mic on? Yep. So we've positioned resources. Part of my director's vision of consolidating IT all in one place, and having the technology, the systems in place, the right people. We're able to better respond to our citizens' needs. I think the work we did during the flood, some of this what I just showed, is a great example of that work. A lot of that work had never been done before. I mean, like I said, I'd never built an inundation map, and it was just great leadership and vision to be confident enough in that work to share it with the public, and engage them. And the public responded. We got hundreds of emails to say, either you got my area correct, or there's something wrong here. There was a two-way street there to communicate with them. So we need to continue this moving forward. We've made a lot of progress with our open data site. I think we still have to do a better job of marketing it to inform people that, hey, this information's out there for you to do something with it to help our community.
Yeah, so working with citizens, what we've seen a lot is that making applications that are easy to use for the average day citizen is really what you want to focus on. What I've seen, like when I used to work at the city, I would make these very complex applications that like an engineer would have to use. But what we see was, and we try to make other people use those applications, and it really was hard, right? You'd have to create a manual about how to use the website, right? And if you have to make a manual for a website, it's probably too complex. So what we would try to do nowadays is try to make tools and applications where it answers a question really quickly about what you're trying to get across, and to tell that in a way where the citizens can quickly get that response that they're looking for based on the data that you have. So I think that's a lot of people are starting to make applications that way, where the data, where the tools just help the users, the end users, really quickly get the answers that they're looking for.
I would echo both those things, and I think it's also important, like, we joke sometimes on the team that the things we build are popular, but it doesn't mean that kids are coming home from school and like clicking on parcel maps, rather than looking at other stuff. So I think a lot of it is also making it easy, making it available, advertising it, but also marrying it to the right problems that people actually have, so that there's like a compelling need to lean into it. And this is still the hard part in a lot of cases, and making it so that when people lean into it and start to engage with the data, something actually happens on the other side, right? There's a process in place where somebody from the government or whoever the party is takes an action, and that part really is the tough part. You mentioned the technology is the easy part sometimes. I think we both know it's not always so easy, but that's spending the time to make the hard part easy. It's the process piece. Like, how do you give somebody feedback so that when they engage with the data, they're like, oh, this is worthwhile to play with this map because something happens. Because it is possible to lose people if they go to your site and they're like, I reported that, and then nothing happened. And so yeah, echo that and add that.
So Warren, for Baton Rouge, great job putting that GIS data together. A short story and then a question. After Katrina made landfall in New Orleans, we, like you, were trapped in our offices doing some emergency response. And what we were getting was NASA flyovers that showed water rising in the city. And what we didn't understand is the storm had passed. Where was that water coming from? Well, we didn't know at the time that the levees had broken and water was coming in. So your GIS data after the August flood was based on real-time observations initially? The part of the question, and then it looked like later you had USGS data to show maybe flood water in the area. So the question is, were you able to, or did you have access to NASA flyover data that would have shown you real-time floodwaters rising?
So yes, at first the inundation area was built using real-time data that, like I said, the 911 calls, search and rescue, 311, the road closure data. That's what helped us aggregate everything together and make the original polygon. But remember, this storm sat on us for a few days, and it was cloudy, so they couldn't really fly any imagery. NOAA did come out about midweek, I guess, after Tuesday or Wednesday or so, and they served up all this imagery. And the Civil Air Patrol as well started flying all over. Unfortunately, they didn't cover as much of East Baton Rouge as they did in other parts, but that basically there's images we use to do QA on the work that we had already created. So we did use imagery as part of the process, yes. Did I answer your question?
This question is specifically for Jerry at Loveland. Well, it's a set of questions. First question is, what is the kind of basic value proposition with your service, your paid service, site control, for real estate developers, particularly who are not in the Detroit area, who are in areas like New Orleans that aren't as extensively mapped yet? Second question to that is, if a developer is using your paid service and has mapped their own things and then unsubscribes, what happens to that? Does that data get lost, or can that be recaptured?
It actually deletes your entire company and you're no longer allowed to do business. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't.
Well, I asked that question because I know that some data can be made public and can contribute it publicly, and some isn't. So I'm just wondering if that data can be recaptured later on. And then the third question, I know that you studied insight in grad school, so I'm wondering what you see as kind of some future insights about where this mapping trend is going, and whether some of the big companies, the big information companies like Google, not so much startups, but big companies like Google are getting in on this, and whether they're posing direct competition for companies like yours.
Okay,
I know that's a lot.
We need to get a beer afterwards, I think, but that's all
That
right.
would be good too.
That's right. If you're old enough, I can't tell. It's dark over there.
I am.
Come here and get in trouble on stage for. I mean, really quick. Like our basic proposition, what we started from is recognizing that the land grid is a very valuable part of understanding geospatial anything. How the earth is owned, how the earth is taxed, how the earth is built on is fundamental to how we all live, but it's not well understood. We're sort of weird in that, you know, we could make more money if we went and worked directly with real estate developers, but we tend to be more focused on block clubs, neighborhood groups, community groups, government departments, because we're crazy like that. Or it's, you know, it's what we know in Detroit. It feels like the good guy side to be more so on. Now that said, real estate developers can obviously use the tool, and what the paid site does is it gives you all the information we have on the public site, but you can import your own data via spreadsheets and other kinds of information into it. So if you have an inventory of what you own, you pop that in, and suddenly you're comparing that to other public data sets that are available. And you, in some ways, you pay for privacy because your paid account allows you to save things that other people don't see. So anyway, that's that. And then the future of all this, that'd be a good conversation. I mean, I feel like that's something for all of us here. I mean, I get scared all the time because you know, it's actually on my bio on the site. What brought me to Houston for this future studies program was just recognizing how incredible the acceleration of what computers is doing, what becomes possible, how it becomes possible to capture the world essentially, simulate it, model it, distribute that, understand how people behave day, night, the phone in your pocket. I mean, the transparency is actually, it's terrifying. And where this is going really soon between Esri and everything else, I think, is like a fully simulated and modeled planet where all the information is available for everyone to see, including a lot of human behaviors that we would currently consider entirely inappropriate to look into. We have enough challenges. We're still at this point where when we put public data on the public website, you know, people from government still freak out sometimes. And you're like, that's public information. And so, well, it doesn't feel public right now, or like X, Y, or Z. And it's like, wow, if that's the case, you know, think about all the things that are going to be tracked and shared and whatnot. So what that means for mapping in the future, a lot more big data, a lot more transparent globe. I don't know, I won't get into politics, but I'm not sure what trying to be super nationalistic right now is actually going to do on a 25,000 mile around ball that has cameras watching it from space and everybody, you know, feeding their life into their phones. I'll stop there because this is probably where we come back to the beer later on, but thoughts?
Thank you.
Yeah, that idea, I think, you know, there's one idea that I've thought of, that I've heard a lot about lately is sensors, like all these sensors that are coming online. And, you know, I thought there was some sessions on autonomous cars and stuff, but those all got sensors on them, right? So there's going to be this massive amount of data that's all location-based. And what do you do with that data? You can use it to make better decisions, right? So I might have autonomous vehicles constantly telling me, like, the quality of my streets, right? And it might help me, like, so I don't have to get a call that says my street bad. The car told the city that the street was bad to fix it, right? Another thing that's going on is there's just this massive amount of digital data coming online from a whole new satellite networks coming online that's supposed to be able to take imagery of the Earth, the complete Earth, I think every other day or something like that, coming online soon. So you have all this massive amount of data, and I think what a lot of companies are doing is, like you said, Google, I don't know where you went, but Google, all these huge technology companies are seeing the value of location data within their platforms as well, right? So I think actually Google Maps was like the precursor to what started like this whole location, this location initiative, right? Because everybody started using Google Maps on their phone to find Starbucks and find all this other stuff. But now people want to know beyond that, like what parcel's under Blight, or where's the floodplain at? Google Maps can't tell you that kind of stuff, right? So that's what's getting everybody excited about how you use this location data with all your business data as well. So you can look at it, overlaid it with your all your sales, comparable sales, all this kind of stuff, and try to compare that on where you want to invest money, on what do you think is going to happen with the environment, what do you think is going to happen with flooding. All this kind of data is just how do you consume all this data and make it available and make good decisions based on it. I think that's one of the challenges, but it's also one of the really cool things in the future I think that's going to happen.
Warren, how close is Baton Rouge to being able to track blight and blighted properties and adjudicated properties?
So,
which is a big problem for us, especially in the northern part of the parish.
We track adjudicated properties already from the assessor's tax roll. Every year about this time, they're preparing the tax roll to send to the Louisiana Tax Commission, and come January we'll get a copy of that. Assessor's been great to work with. So we're tracking adjudicated parcels now. However, it's only once a year, so I'd like to speed that up a little bit. As far as blight, we're still reacting to blight. We find out about blight through a 311 request from a citizen. And since the flood, there's probably a lot more blight that we haven't even learned about yet. People that just didn't move back to their houses. We've started these conversations on how to track that. I think we're going to lean on on different departments than we have in the past, such as our police, even the DA, folks like this who are out in neighborhoods on a regular basis. I work in the basement of City Hall. I don't get out much. But we got to tap into all of our resources that are out there to find this and then address the problem, right?
I think we have time for one more quick question.
I'll make this quick. I just want to echo Justin's appreciation for Warren and all of the work that Warren and your staff there have done. I'll give you a quick example of how I've used as a private sector practitioner. We're working with a state agency to address the funding to renovations following the flood recovery throughout the state. Some of that has been here in East Baton Rouge Parish, and we've got a champion with Warren here, and the data he's made available to us where we can look up street addresses of these properties, confirm the parcel that are occupied by these homes, and direct inspectors, environmental inspectors, to the correct location. Now, I can't do that across the whole state, which is where it's very exciting, Jerry, to look at your product, and I've actually been using that to look up these addresses in other jurisdictions. My question is, some of them aren't on board yet because these assessors are charging for their data, obviously. Do you have a plan for acquiring that data? And secondly, across the nation, what is the update frequency of these parcel data? Thanks.
Sure. So I had a conversation earlier today, and I'll say that when we went out to create our nationwide parcel map, it was, as you'd imagine, originally like catch as catch can. The mandate was like, Google every county, add GIS to it, search for download. If it's there, download it. If there's a parcel viewer, if it has an open API, nerd talk, download that. If it costs less than $200, buy it. Got a lot of DVDs, mailed to us. Keep track of everything in a giant 32,000 row, 3,200 row spreadsheet. And then, if it's possible to keep updating it automatically, go and do it. And so there's a variety of different ways in which it's done. Now, some of the conversations we've had here at the state level, it's been neat because we've been able to go, okay, we have this many parishes, and I forget how many we have. We have most in the state, but not all. I think we're missing like 9 or 10, right? And but the conversations are like, oh, you need that to happen? Well, like I know those people. Do you know what I mean? Or I know the person, or I can call those people and be like, hey, we really need that right now. And that's kind of how we've worked around the country, is when there's a compelling need or a partnership, it becomes a lot easier. Because if we Google or if we call, they're like, some dope from Michigan wants our parcels, click, click, whatever. But if there's a project or partnership going on, it's like, hey, this is useful, please do this, Harry, please do this, Jenny, then it can happen. So, it would be awesome. I think there's some relationships here to help fill in the missing pieces. And for those who are hesitant, having it out there and having had it out there, it shows that the sky doesn't fall, I think. Do you know what I mean? If it's available. So, thank you for that.
All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time. If anybody has additional questions, please find these guys. They one thing I know about people who make maps and crunch data is they love to talk about it. So find them. Let's thank them one more time. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Warren.